I want to welcome everybody. The reason I'm speaking first is because I have the luck of living right in this town, and this is actually my neighborhood, not just my district, but I live right across the street. My name is Joe Cruz. I was elected in 16. I'm on 3 different committees. It's insurance and real estate. I'm not going to forget. Oh my God, this is bad, huh? What am I? Oh, energy and technology and housing. That's pretty bad. It's been a while. We just got done with session, so I'm still scrambled in my brain a little bit. And the way we're going to work it tonight is we have 4 representatives here. We all are in the same house. Christine Conley shares Groton with me, and she has Ledger. We have Kate Rotella, who has Stonington and North Stonington, parts of both. And then Anthony Nolan, who I share New London with. And yeah, right, we have New London in the house. So what we thought would be great is to bring, basically us here as a region tonight, 4 representatives that will be able to help answer different questions. 4 people who are on different committees. I only share one committee with Anthony on one of them. And to start off tonight, we're just going to get right into it. And basically, we're going to bring up like one of the bills that was important to us, something that we fought for during the session, explain what that bill meant, and at the end, we're just going to pick one bill each, which will give us a lot of time for questions from the audience, because we know you came in with questions, and we want to be able to help answer those as well as we can. So without further ado, Christine Conley.
Thank you, Joe. So I share half of Groton in a section of Gales Ferry. I share Groton with Joe. I get share Gales Ferry with another representative that shares a little north of us. I sit on Judiciary Committee, which takes up the bulk of my time, Planning and Development, and Transportation. Judiciary Committee does all your criminal laws and your major civil laws. Transportation does your roads, bridges, and the agencies that handle road work. And then Planning and Development is kind of your catch-all. It does all of your municipality or your town and city needs that might affect one person and not a large group. So the bills that I'm most proud of is the pre-existing health conditions bill. I worked on that 2 years ago. Unfortunately didn't pass the House and Senate 2 years ago, but once I got reelected, worked right on the drafting of that language to get that bill through. Kate Rotella was helpful working on that bill with me as well. As a large group of our representatives, it did pass the House 100%, passed the Senate, I believe 100% as well, and is waiting on the governor's desk for signature. The governor does have until July 22nd to sign all the bills. So some things he just hasn't gotten to yet, but he will. There's no sign that that bill is in trouble at this moment. It does cover pre-existing conditions for all of our programs, all of our insurance that the state has control over, and it covers pre-existing conditions on what are called short-term insurance policies. Those are your 6-month or lessers. So if you're in between insurance and you get these short-term policies, they have to cover pre-existing conditions as well. So it's a benefit to all of us. If our federal laws do backtrack, the residents of Connecticut will be covered on pre-existing conditions, and the federal government cannot change that for us. So it's beneficial to everyone. I also worked a lot on plastic bags, and plastic bags did make it through in the budget that passed the House and the Senate. The governor did sign that already. I believe he signed it today. I think I got an email.
We got a text,
yeah. And that is as of August. There's a 2-year 10-cent fee on plastic bags to get all of us in the habit of using your plastic bags, using your reusable bags. So if you forget, you need a plastic bag starting in August, it'll be 10 cents. If you do forget, because none of us are perfect, remember you can carry your items out too. You don't need a bag if you have just a couple items, or you can do what they do at Costco. You can just keep your items in your cart. You can take them to your car. You can put them back in your car and then bring them into your home. But after the 2 years, 2021, it's going to be a ban on plastic bags. So that is very important to our shoreline communities, all of us, is to get those bags out of the water, out of the rivers, and to get us all in the habit, because no one's perfect, of remembering to use your reusable bags. There were a lot of other bills that I worked on, but those are some of the 2 that I spent an awful lot of time on. So I'll hand it over to Kate to talk about some of the bills you worked on.
Thank you. So I am Kate Rotella. I sat on the Appropriations Committee, which is the expense side of the budget. So there's the revenue side, which sits under finance, and the expense side, which is on appropriations. I also sit on the Education Committee for K through 12. And in the Appropriations Committee, there's also subcommittees. So I sat on all the government subcommittees, and I also sat on the higher ed subcommittees. Additionally, I sat on the internship committee. So any of you that might have college students interested in applying for internship, I would encourage that because that was a great committee and a great way for our students who are in our local universities to get involved and come up and help us. And I know you guys both had interns, didn't you?
We did,
Yep,
yeah.
did you? I did not have one. I sat on the committee, I did not have one. I had one for about 2 seconds, but somebody else needed them. So, but they do a lot of work and they are very, very helpful. So, anyway, so I would say for me, you know, this was my freshman term, and it was so exciting, and I am so proud of everything that we did up there, and I believe that we passed a great budget. You know, is the budget perfect? There's no perfect budget, but I am proud of what we did. I believe that it was fiscally responsible for our town, and for our towns, for our children, and for our state into the future. Some of the bills that I worked on, in addition to some that Christine talked about, is the Speaker's Blue Ribbon Commission on Tourism, which is a big bill for this area. So we have an area that has a visitors welcome center that was not open. It now will be open, which is going to be huge for our state, right? The tourism industry in Connecticut supports more than 82,000 jobs, and it's $14.7 billion in business sales, and $1.7 billion in tax revenues. We needed to support that industry, and now I believe that we're headed in that direction. Another important bill was the Social Security and pension income tax. So I heard from a lot of people that seniors were scared. They were not going to be able to afford to stay here. And I think we all heard about that, right, on the campaign trail as we were out there talking with people. I'm proud to say that we were able to bring back the 50% on the pension tax. So teachers' pensions will now come back up to the 50% mark for not having income tax, not going against income tax under certain income limits. So there's income limits based on if you're a single filer or a family filer. Those income limits were actually raised. We raised those thresholds, which was really great. Additionally, we included pensions in it, not just teachers' pensions, but pensions and annuity tax. So I think that's big, and it was it's really, really going to work out well, I think, for our aging seniors in our community. Well, I think we would all say you're welcome. You're welcome, right? So I will now hand it over, and there was a ton of stuff. I could stay up here and talk all night, but I won't. Anthony.
Good evening, Anthony Nolan from New London. I'm the fresh of the freshest up here. I was in a special election in February, just this year, and I am the trial by fire, I think, representative. I got in the midst of it, in the middle of everything, and I was able to absorb a whole lot of information and learn a lot this far into the year. I've enjoyed my time up there so far, and plan on trying to submit some new bills soon over the summertime to get ready for next year. But the bills, there's just so many bills, as you can see with the handout that you were given, how many bills were put out there. That's just some of them. And there are many in there that I loved, but the specific ones that I like some of the most in there are the teen vaping laws. Those push the vaping, that tobacco vaping, up to the age of 21, so teens can't get it until they're 21. And also the PTSD bill for emergency personnel. That's a huge one that would help those that are going through some mental health issues with some of the activities that you have as emergency workers. So those are some really important things, I think, for us. But the teen vaping one is a huge one because it's going to try, it will help eliminate the addiction to tobacco for people under 21. I think the state found that people that do take or smoke tobacco before the age of 21 are most likely to become addicted to it. So we're hoping to eliminate that most likely thing. And that's about it. So I'm just looking forward to any questions that you have. And Joe Dela Cruz is
Yep.
your man here, so we're
Coming
gonna let him
back, this
close
is
out.
we're back in district now. And my bill, as a freshman, I remember leaving and almost saddened at how little we got done, to me, for the working poor. We left that last budget with a gap with people that had Medicare, that were gonna fall into this donut hole and not be covered. We left that first session with our stomachs upset. We knew it was a really tough budget, we knew it was a bad budget. I think as a sophomore, I came in ready to swing and fight right off the bat for the things that meant the most to me. And I will get right into the bill that what really drove me to even run again and to make sure that we could help support people, and that was the minimum wage. As controversial as it may sound to some folks that are nervous about raising it, we see on the news every day that this will be the reason that, you know, the final nail in the coffin. All these things you hear about minimum wage that simply aren't true, especially when the states around us have already outpaced us when we talk about minimum wage. When Boston and New York, when we lose jobs to those people, or anything that goes in any direction in that way, the reality is Boston and New York already have higher minimum wages than us. They already have paid family medical leave. They already have these things in place where if you live in Massachusetts and you work in Massachusetts, you have health insurance. So they've taken care of all those steps that I think, in my opinion, a lot of businesses that come in, when you want to draw a business to our state, they don't want to be looked at as the business, the guy that's going to save the state. They want to be part of a cohesive unit. And I think Boston's done that in a lot of different ways. And that's why you see the population growth, even though their tax structure is very similar to ours. That's why, to me, it was so important, especially coming from two districts, Groton and New London, that both have the largest federally subsidized housing projects in our entire region, subtracting Norwich out of it. We have a 420-unit housing section right up at Branford Manor. Those are all folks that, remember, and if you're a Groton resident or a New London resident, and you think about minimum wage and how it impacts your economy directly, I've been in the construction industry my whole life. I've painted houses, I've done all these different things, and I know one thing: when you leave New London or Groton, if you're leaving the housing projects where I grew up, and you work for your minimum wage in all these other towns, whether you're landscaping for somebody, or you're painting their house, or whatever you're doing, power washing, at the end of the day, you come back with the minimum wage that you've earned in your pocket, and all the subsidies happen in our cities. And especially to be a representative of two towns that have these large populations of folks that live on minimum wage every day, that was the reason that I went up there. I feel like the fact that we were able to get them raises from my first term, I think Chris will remember, I was screaming and yelling that we got to get them something. Because there's folks that have been up there for a long time that said, well, it's all or nothing. We said fight for 15, that's what we came in with, and we're leaving with nothing. And you know what we left with that first term? Nothing. So people that were making $10.10 an hour had another year of $10.10 an hour. And I didn't want that to happen. So I was more than happy to see the minimum wage go through, and $1 a year up until the 2024. It'll be $15 an hour at that point, and automatically ties into the economy. Guess what? Like every single thing else does. Social Security, people's pensions, even if you have something in the stock market, everything's based on cost of living. So in the future, the most important thing I think that we did was we tied minimum wage into something that never has to be voted on again. We never have to revisit it. Folks are gonna get raises, so when gasoline is $15 a gallon 30 years from now, people aren't still making $15 an hour. The minimum wage is gonna do just like Social Security does. And if you look at my point of view, with almost 30% of Americans working at the minimum wage, the input cannot stay the same if Social Security goes up on COLA. The input must increase for everyone to be taken care of. And it's a scary thought. I know a lot of folks, I know a lot of folks in restaurants, because by my shape, you guys can all understand, I spend a lot of times at tables in restaurants for lunch and dinner. But I talk to these folks, and when you give them the understanding that, you know, okay, they're the small mom and pop, but they'll pay that little bit more for the minimum wage, but so will all these big businesses in town, like the Walmarts and even the McDonald's, that have for a very long time relied on the fact that their folks that work for them, at the end of the day, go back to Branford Manor or back to the housing projects in New London. So that is probably my most proud moment when that actually passed. I think there was a lot of people that were excited. The rule in our chamber is you can't cheer, you can't whistle, you can't clap. Because I get it, if you're on the other side of the issue, there shouldn't be, you know, not in your face type of thing. But at the end, to talk to them and say, guys, listen, you know, this
The
is
next
not,
day.
it's not the end of the world, and we can get together, and this is gonna all work out, so.
And that was a 24-hour debate, so we were all a bit slap happy and
Yes.
noon the next day from
We-
that long discussion.
So we gabbled in at noon, and at 2 o'clock, we were out of there in the afternoon, the next day.
Next day.
And a gentleman had a question for me earlier, and I can speak for all of us. When you go up to everyone says, well, geez, you're not a state rep full-time, that's not what you do for a living? It feels that way, but the reality is, we all make $28,000 a year to do this job, and nobody gets in there up there, and I've met one person that's up there for the money, because if that's your reason, boy, do you have a problem. Because the $28,000 wouldn't get much for you. For us, it's always been, for me, it's been a passion, and I know the three people that I stand here with all share one thing in common. We have full-time, high-pressure jobs. You know, when I say high pressure, we work kind of in small offices. We have a police officer, that's no pressure at all in Nolan, right? That's just easy. But we all manage to do our job and do this at the same time, and we're proud to do it. But we're also, I think we get a little helter-skelter. It was good to see the deer in the headlights look when we saw them start to get scheduled for their meetings, because Christine and I went through that 2 years ago. We said, what did we just do? What did we just do? They told us 2 nights, 3 nights a week. This seems to be full-time, it's 5, 10 nights a week, and there's only 7 days. But that's where we came from, and I think the purpose of doing all this is to open up the floor to get questions, so we can bring feedback to Hartford. And we'll keep track with who's raising their hands about what, and I'm sure there's issues, and we have 1, 2, you're first, the first question of the
Woman
night.
in the red sweater.
The minimum wage starting in 2024, it says it's going to be indexed to change it to the Federal Employment Cost Index. I don't know what that is. What is that?
They did not go with a COLA, they went with the cost index,
Right.
because it was more reflective of what the economy actually looks like. It grew at a little bit slower rate than the COLA did.
Yeah, it grows this index grows at less of a rate than the Social Security index. So folks might be used to the Social Security raises, and this index just has a little bit less growth, it's a little bit less helter-skelter. So it's just another federal index. There's about 10 or 15 different federal indexes, and this is the one that was picked in the bill. If it turns out that this is too much or too little, then the legislature can always change it to a different index.
So you're saying this is less than the cost of living index?
This is less than the index used for Social Security.
What is used for Social Security?
It's a different federal index, I don't know what that one.
Okay, well, I still want to understand what this index is.
So an index works so you use that as a stat to raise a rate, right? So for this particular index, that's the index they wanted to use because it had less volatility and it was not as reactive. It was a little less aggressive, okay? So that's why they decided to use that one. It is one of the labor indexes that are used throughout the country for different raises. So you have to stay in the labor index pool.
So this would say, like, if the
Page
economy is
13.
flat, then no one gets a raise. Or if the economy
Right.
is negative, then minimum wage would not
Would
go
not go
down,
up.
it would
It
just
would-
stay how it is. If the economy is positive, just like Social Security folks get on October 1st, the economy is doing well, you have this much increase in your wages.
And they did a 10-year look back, and there were a couple of years where there would have been no raise. But labor and even someone that was as big of a proponent of the bill as I was, saw the value in that, because we can have a couple flat years. And if that does stay flat, that may help, that'll be a year that helps a small business out, because obviously their business is probably a little off too. And that's why they chose that one index though. And we should, we'll state our names too if we want, you don't have to. We're gonna actually have this on camera, because we've done a couple where there weren't a huge turnout, but the value of it being on TV and being played again, we got a lot of good feedback from that. So if you don't want to be, is there anyone in here that doesn't want to be on TV at all? So you? Okay. If the camera, we won't pan anywhere past that, but I think for the most part, they're gonna leave the camera forward. We may repeat the question sometimes so they can hear it here, on TV, so don't get annoyed with that, but If you want to say your name and say where you're from, you can do that too, as we ask questions,
If you
so.
choose not to, that's
If you
your
choose not to,
prerogative.
that's great too, but what a great turnout for this sunny day, because I was wondering how many people were gonna leave the flip-flops on and stay at home. Right here, you're next in the back.
I got a little horses, so bear with me.
Yeah.
My name is Steve Mann. I have a business in Potluck. I wish it could be in Groton. We've been in the Stonington side most of our 46 years of business. So I've got a lot of
Congratulations.
experience. The camera girl works for me. Over the last 25 of the 46 years, I have seen gross sales go down significantly for us. It's not that important what business I'm in, but a good deal of it is gone. A good deal of business in Groton is gone. For one reason or another, they could not keep up. In the New London Day a couple of days ago was a discussion of retail sales around the country, not just for small retailers, but for big chains closing their doors. An increase in the minimum wage may be entirely unlikely or impossible because of the way the economy is functioning for a good deal of the businesses. You add all the costs, and you will see that it's just too much for people to bear. Some businesses may be very good, where government projects are involved, including here in Groton, where people really don't have any say as far as submarines. Some want them, others don't want them. So some people are protected, but a lot of people are not protected at all. And you're also talking about tolls, which I know you're going to defer for the next couple of years, the next session perhaps. But if you add increases in minimum wage and plus tolls and everything else, you're going to find no incentive for people to stay in business. So I haven't been approached at all by anybody from the state legislature. I don't talk to you, I'm busy in my store doing what I have to do. But I just want you to know what is going on from my personal point of view. I wish I could pay the girls that work for me, the people, an extra $10 an hour. But they know it would be an impossibility. So take a real close look at what you're doing and see if it's going to work down the road.
And I thank you for the comment, and I would comment quickly on the retail side of it. Nationally and locally, we're seeing a huge decline in sales at the store, at the point of sale, mostly because of Amazon, mostly because of folks like that. And believe it or not, when you look, without raising minimum wage, and I know it sounds counterproductive to an economy, but Amazon has taken billions of dollars in federal aid so their employees can not just live, but survive. These are folks that, and again, I remember back in the day when at the mall, Christine Conley tells the story, I tell the story. If I graduated high school in 1989 like I did, and went into Sears and Roebuck or ShopRite or Stop and Shop, it was a full-time job with health insurance, benefits, and all these good things. As the economy went away from providing all that, businesses have been screaming for a long time, they don't want to provide health insurance, and at the same time, they're not increasing wages. So I think what we're seeing is, again, it is scary, it is daunting to look at, but I actually think if the folks that worked in New London and in the projects here were making a livable wage, where they had a little bit of extra money in their pocket, they would actually go out and spend it. The one study we have shown and proven, and we don't have to do a study about it. If you make $10 an hour or you make $15 an hour, every single dime you make, you spend. Not because you want to, not because you're not a saver, because every single dime is needed. Rents locally are anywhere between $700 and $1,000 a month. When you start doing the math, people physically aren't living on $10.10 an hour. So again, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for being in business for as long as you have and supporting the town as you have. From my point of view, I think this is something that will work out. And I know and I run a business, but it's basically a union business, so I'm used to the wages being much higher than normal anyway. And people say maybe that's clouded me, but I also visit folks that live in public housing every single day and realize that it's not the $11 an hour that we can't afford, or the 15, if they're going home and getting all those extra services. So it's really about that and making a fair economy.
And this, because the gentleman did mention retail, remember how convenient it is to get something delivered to your house in 2 days on the phone. We have a lot of good folks who live locally who are not only making they're paying their bills, but hiring people. And they are in the retail business. So if it costs you a few more pennies to support your neighbor, I know Amazon's at my house right now. There's a box that has dog food in it. Came right to the door. But when you can, please support your local, because if we lose our local businesses and we just have Amazon, yes, they're in New Haven now, which they're hiring another 1,200 people, but it will help Groton, Stonington, New London to make sure that we support we support our businesses. And in the retail market, there are certain things we all need to buy every week, every month. Let's try to keep our money local. For our favorite aunt over there.
Hi, hey, Cruz from New London. I have a question, and I don't know if anybody has ever thought about it, the state capitol. I serve both on the city council and on the Board of Education. And it seems like most towns, the first thing they cut is education. Because education is just a line item in municipal budgets. I was wondering if there's any thought given to making education its own entity, where it's not in the municipal budget or a selectmen or whatever town budget. New Hampshire, I believe, does that. When I had a place in New Hampshire, I used to get 2 bills, education and the towns. I was wondering if any thought was being given to that, because truly, especially in London, and Anthony knows that, first thing they cut is education. Just cut it, because they don't have to say in where to cut, just cut. They only can say, I cut $1 million out of your budget. They can't tell us you gotta get rid of Kate Rotella or Anthony Nolan. So I thought maybe you might take a look at that to see if it could be its own entity, so that they do their own budget, and of course it'll be primary, but it's not going to be a line item in the municipal budget. Understand that?
So I can speak a little bit to that. So we are looking at different ways that so the state is funding education. The municipal side of it, when the city or the town, right, will cut something in the education budget, we at the state don't have any control over. What we can control is what we're giving through the ECS formula. Correct. And how that formula is working. So I can tell you that I've already sat in some meetings where we're looking at that formula, and we're looking at how we actually are funding education and how to better support our cities and our towns on education. I know that you want it separate. Yeah. So that's something that we can talk about, certainly. Certainly we can talk about doing it that way. Yeah,
The state,
absolutely.
the state can make recommendations to the towns.
Yeah.
When the states make mandates to the towns, usually the towns
Don't like
don't
that.
like that.
They
So
don't-
if more people feel the way you feel, talk to your state and your town.
Yes, but I think that would be state legislation that would create that. The town just can't say, we're making an own entity. It has to come out of the state legislature to say, now boards of education throughout the state of Connecticut will be their own entity.
I can tell you with all the talk that goes on up there in regards to trying to make things better, that has been talked about, but it's a matter of how to propose it. And if you're saying that if New Hampshire's doing it, well, maybe we'll have someone look into how they're doing it, so that we can understand it better. But I do know that there are some people that have small talk in regards to it, because it's always been something that we've been concerned about. So
Yeah.
it is something.
And I would say too, we almost started those kind of conversations. So, our governor was brave enough to introduce the budget that he introduced that included regionalization. I had the pleasure of sitting on the education committee and having bus loads of people come in and give testimony about why we shouldn't regionalize. Now, regionalization would have fed into what you're talking about, some more state funding, right? But when I say to you, so our email server blew up at one point, it crashed. That's how many emails we were getting from towns, certain towns, that wanted nothing to do with regionalization. And the regionalization conversation was, it took courage to introduce that, and we started the conversation. So I would say, I think we started the conversation, and we'll continue to go about the conversation, right? So
Regionalization is important, and I know which towns certainly don't want it. But every town in the state, perhaps 169 towns, builds a school. And you know how much schools cost. If
Right.
Regionalizing would be different.
The only thing I think of the regionalization part in a couple different ways too. Being on a town council and seeing our department work with our kids and having that uniqueness that we have here in New England. Again, when we talk about changing the way our system is, a lot of times when I hear regionalization, it follows up with, well, in Texas, there'd be one superintendent for every single kid in this whole state. In Texas, in Florida, in Alabama, the one thing I don't hear is anybody that I knock on the door saying, well, I'm gonna bring my kid to Texas or Alabama and get them educated and then bring them back here. That's not something that's ever in the conversation. So I wanna make sure that we don't lose focus on who Connecticut is, who we are, because I was a kid that went through public education in Connecticut and was proud to. And I wanna make sure, just seeing the contrast in what my nephew does and goes through in Houston, Texas, is a far cry from what we get to have here in Connecticut. And we gotta make sure that we don't rip the fabric right away from, and I get part of regionalization, maybe cost buying and stuff like that, but the kid that I work with right now is talking about putting this kid in private school right now. He's a baby, he's 9 months old. But in Sprague, they said that they were gonna, and it's been voted on, and I can't imagine, but they've combined first and second graders. Third grade will be on its own, and fourth and fifth is combined. And now this is information he's given me as a town person who's going to the meetings. I don't know exactly how they're gonna play it out, but who wants that? I don't want my first kid, what is it, A, B, C, D, 5 plus 6, 7. How do you teach first graders and second graders at the same time? I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. And at the end, what's money, what's it worth, and what's most important? And until the conversation really hedges towards, because this is gonna make it better for the kids, and it's a better, like you, your regionalization in your mind is, how do we make it better for the kids? There's other folks that are saying, well, let's just decrease the dollars and we'll figure it out. And we can't waste a generation in my mind. We can't waste time. Every kid has to have the same opportunities we had. Another question, way in back there, yep.
White sweater.
Yeah.
Hi, Kathy Nugent, District 7.
Hi, Kathy, how are you?
Good. I have a question. Some new revenue sources such as sports betting and legalizing marijuana seem to be stymied. Now, there's nothing I'm crazy about those ideas, but since all the other states are doing it, unless we build a Trump-like wall around Connecticut, people are going to engage in
He didn't build one.
syntax.
We did not build a wall.
So, we know how.
Being
that's
built
working.
now.
Could you address where we are on those issues?
Both of this year, I say, are dead.
Well, sports betting may come back in a, if there is an agreement between the tribes and Bridgeport, there is, I think if sports betting does come back, it would come back with a larger casino bill. And if all the parties agree, I know Bridgeport very much does want some more economic development at the waterfront. We, from Southeast Connecticut, have been working with Bridgeport. I know we're not geographically close, but have been working on those. If those, so we may be back on sports betting. But marijuana, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying there aren't the votes to pass that at this time.
Simply not the votes of marijuana, and I would agree with, and this is the reason we need unity, and we've been very united. We don't agree on every single issue, not even close. But remember, when we go up against a Bridgeport that has 5 representatives from that one city, because of population, they can move, sometimes I say they can move mountains.
Yeah.
But together we can also, and I think in our first term, Chris and I were able to fight off folks that wanted to give MGM the right to build a casino in Connecticut, which would have null and voided the contract we have with 2 casinos that have been business partners of ours for almost 30 years. And it's almost the same road we're going down now. If there is anything to do with sports and gaming, that it would go through, because the tribe views it as part of their purview of gambling, and we can all argue about who's right or who's wrong, but if we want it to go through, it's gonna have to go through them, I think.
Yeah, and it's so glad that our group of 2 has expanded to a group of 4.
Yes.
It's very important. There's 151 of us in the House. It's very important, especially on job growth and jobs bills, that we have 4, and we'd like to have more in our group to stand strong for Southeastern Connecticut.
Right over there, yeah.
Yeah, my question is for Representative Conley. You came to my neighborhood last October campaigning, and I had a discussion with you about tolls, and I told you I was opposed to any kind of tolls at all, and you said you would not support tolls on cars, only trucks. And I saw you voted for 3 bills out of committee for tolls on cars. Are you going to keep your word about not voting for tolls on cars?
So thank you for bringing that up. I sit on transportation, which does the tolls, and I committed, and I spoke on the transportation committee that I would commit to vote the toll bills out of committee only. I said on the committee floor that if those 3 bills were up on the House floor, I would not be supporting them on the House floor. I have not found a toll bill on the House floor that I was a yes at this point. I did commit to my leadership that any bill that comes out, I would read it. I'd read it before I decided yes or no, but I have not seen a car toll bill that I was a yes on at this point.
So you would not vote for tolls on cars, period, or are you changing your opinion on it? Because you told me you would not support any bill that had tolls on
When
cars, only trucks.
I was supportive of Governor Lamont's tolls on trucks. I have committed to read a bill before I decide yes or no. I have not found a bill I was a yes on. That's all I can tell you.
It has
You didn't really answer my question.
No.
So
I can't commit to
asked
something I
you
haven't
if
seen.
it had cars tolls on it, would you vote for it? That's my question.
I have not voted on the House floor for car tolls, and if I found a
You
lot
have not,
of
but
people.
you didn't say you will not vote for any bill with tolls on cars.
What I have done with the toll bill when we were talking about voting on the House is I asked how many people said vote yes on tolls and how many people said vote no on tolls. If more people in my district say vote yes on a toll bill, I will listen to the people in my district. If more people say vote no on a toll bill, I will listen to the people in my district.
I'm in your district, I say no.
Thank you.
There's one.
There's one.
And there's more of us than that. There's 2.
We got 2.
We got more than that, I'll tell you that.
And what you said is something that's really important, because that's a deciding factor for many of us, where people call in and talk to us, or people set up appointments to meet with us. When we don't hear from people, and even if it's a handful of people that say yes, and if there's 20 people that say no, and they don't talk to us, we don't know that you're saying no. So that's important for you to try and send some kind of email or make some kind of contact with our office. Because a lot of times, I know in London, I voted on things that I thought that were really good, that I had a lot of constituents call me for. And then after the vote, people started calling me, say, why you do that? And I go, well, why didn't you call me before I did it? Or why didn't you make contact with me? And it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat or other, we have to deal with the fact that we work for everybody. So we're going to listen to you, but it's going to be a strong part of our decision is the constituents that call and let us know things, beside us going around and talking to people. So please remember that.
And I would say things change, right?
Right. Yeah.
Things change. When I went up there first, when I ran in 15, it wasn't like I was knocking on people's doors saying I was looking for tolls. I got up there was a guy, Tony Guerrero from the other side of the state. He did a lot of work on tolls. There was a few people that kept showing me the numbers of where we were and what were the possibilities. How do we get more funding for our roads? How do we get there from here, in other words? How do we fix a $400 million bridge that needs to be done up here? How does all that happen? And as we got looking and realizing, doing some studies and realizing that, 7 out of 10 cars on the road are Connecticut, but 3 out of 10 aren't. And those folks drive for free every day on our roads. So you start to get more information as information trickles in. Here's another one that's brand new, and Chris will have to ponder. We have discussions all the time. I am hugely in favor of tolls, in case you don't know. But in case you're wondering, there's a federal bill that possibly may go through, and you may want to follow this, because it's $2 trillion possibly. And what they're going to do is take the 14.4 cents per gallon tax that the federal government does in excise and gets divided by apportioned plates back to each state. They're gonna add a dime to that. A dime to every gallon of gas. And that's how they're gonna get the $2 trillion. And the way they're gonna divide it, shovel-ready projects. People that have money ready to invest in their own state, in their own town, to put roads in their own area and neighborhoods and states. We don't have that. And what we were hoping for is to get a toll bill through. When I say we, I mean we and a few other of my friends, not everybody that's standing up here. But in the end, if we miss that opportunity, if we miss that window, it'll just be another opportunity, in my opinion, that Connecticut misses, as we typically do with a lot of different things. If we can take try to imagine any other plan where you give $2 to somebody and they give you $8 back. Imagine saying no to that. And that's what we're doing. Because we're not gonna be able to borrow our way to fix all those roads. The Waterbury Mixmaster, $7 billion. These are real numbers that we need real solutions. And by just us saying that we're not gonna do anything, it's not fair for the people that voted for us, first of all. They're hard decisions.
I think on transportation is we see the amount of money that these road projects will cost. And I think a lot of folks, and I am in the minority, people who aren't excited about tolls. I am in the minority, and it's okay. It's not a bad place to be. But I see a lot of folks talk about, when we talk about unfunded pension debt, people say, well, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you know these bills were coming? Well, those of us on the Transportation Committee, which I've sat on for 3 years, we know these big bills are coming. We know the Gold Star Bridge is going to cost over $500 million to fix the northbound lanes. We know the Waterbury Mixmaster. I don't drive much in Waterbury, it's really far away, but others do. We all drive through 91 to 84, and we see that mess. We all, from time to time, go down to New York, and we see what's that mess. And we see in the legislature, we do see the bills. Right now, the problem is there's no solution on how to pay for it. If tolls is not what we do as a state, which is okay, we need to find a solution to pay for it. And realize that bonding or just taking a loan or put it on the credit card is not a proper solution either. And I think I'm in, I would say, the minority who says, I don't like any of these plans, but I still don't have a better answer as to how to pay for these projects. I see the price, I know it has to be paid for. In 10 years, we have a big problem in paying for roads and bridges, but there is absolutely no solution right now that 51% of the House and Senate are agreeing on, and the governor's going to sign. And that is a big issue for all of us to work on over the next few years.
Hi, I'm Allie Mitchell. I live right down the street in Groton. So, gonna piggyback off of this pulse question. I don't think we should leave it yet. Part of the context of this is the fact that the transportation little pot of money that was sitting there, some would say got used for a really good purpose, some would say mismanaged, some would say taken into general budget questions, right? So it seems like part of this is to put a Band-Aid on a problem that was caused by state budgeting in a way that we have no assurances will actually solve the problem that was caused by state budgeting, because there are no protections to ensure that the money would actually go to the thing.
Well,
right, so I'm wondering if we can give a little bit of context to that, to let those of us who don't trust necessarily that this money will be used to fix roads.
So in the election we just came through, you had a question on the ballot and it passed for a special transportation lockbox. So there's your assurance. The money goes in there and it stays in there and can only be used for transportation infrastructure. It is a different lockbox than the original lockbox, and there are different accounting rules now. And so that's your assurance for that. And so, and to piggyback on just some things that we talked about a little bit here, I would say this. One thing I learned in my freshman session up there is in the committee meetings, right? Sometimes you have to vote to get things out of committee so that they can get to where they need to be. And then the real vote comes when it hits the floor, if it ever hits the floor. And sometimes it won't hit the floor, and sometimes you say, you go on record in the committee meeting saying, okay, I'm gonna vote for it to get it out of committee, but, you know, I reserve my right. Well, you don't have to go on record saying that because you always reserve your right on the House floor. So I want to address that a little bit. And also, I would say this to you, in some public hearings, which I've been in, where they go on for hours and hours and hours, when it comes down to the voting time, and you know, right, and Anthony's been there with me, because the appropriation hearings can go long. Sometimes you're voting to get it out of committee, and you know, you're just doing it, and they don't want everybody to particularly go on record just because everyone wants to get out of the 10-hour hearing you were just in. But that being said, I just wanted to talk about that, right? Because, but we have not had a bill come up on the House floor on tolls. However, as Joe said, we have bills that have to be paid. And so we have to think about how we're going to do that. And is tolls the right solution, or is bonding the right solution? And I'm gonna say to you, if we have to borrow the money, we're gonna have to cut some of the programs that we have out there. I mean, there's only so much money, right? So we have to talk about what is the right solution. We can't just say, no, don't put tolls up, but we still have to fix the roads. So I would like everyone to talk to us about it. Let's have open dialogue about it, but hear both sides of it, because it is such an important issue for all of us. But again, we would get some contributions from out-of-state drivers. And I do want to say, though, the few things that were floated around, Connecticut drivers would certainly be paying less. And there was even stuff put in for lower income people, and they would get preloaded easy passes sent to them. So there was a lot of stuff thought about for our residents. So anyway, so I hope that helped a little bit.
So just want to follow up on that. Can you tell us what a lockbox is? And if someone tries to unlock it, will that person goes to jail?
No, but that person doesn't have to be voted in again. That's where the people have the power, is that it's a constitutional lockbox, that any money that goes into lockbox can only be used on roads projects. But if the citizens don't like what happens, you have the power every 2 years. Every 2 years, the citizens have all the power. That if you don't like what your representatives or senators are doing, you get to vote. And everyone gets to vote. And I think years in the past, before any of us were representatives, yes, the Special Transportation Fund was rated for other purposes. But we, even though we sit in seats of people who may have voted for that in the past, we cannot be responsible for their decisions, because the people, they are not there right now. Whether or not they were not voted in because of that decision, or because of other decisions, or because they're retired, I cannot undo the sins of Connecticut for the last several hundred years.
So I agree, part of us is about, you know, voting you guys out or voting you guys in, but then what about accountability? You cannot keep over-promising something and then decided to change your mind.
I will say that,
I mean, understanding that, what I've seen since I've been here is that, fortunately, people change. People's views
Absolutely.
change. And all of us might agree to not mess with the lockbox, but that can be voted above our heads. I mean,
We can all vote no,
we can vote no, but they can still open that lockbox if they figure that it's a need and a necessity.
But
you know.
besides that lockbox, the lockbox we're not talking about here is if we're gonna raise money through tolls, we will be breaking federal law. If we take one nickel that you put in a toll, that you send in the Easy Pass, that comes automatically to your door, by the way, you don't put a nickel in anywhere, so that comes automatically to your, if you take one of those nickels, and the federal government finds out about it, you lose all federal funding, all gone. And to be more specific, they talk about just putting a toll just on 95 because it's our busiest road. Well, the reason I disagree with that is because I live on 95. And I think 81 and 84, I think it should be spread out through the state, who pays for what. But in the end, you know, the lockbox it's not just self-imposed, it's imposed by the federal government. So we can't take the risk of losing 80% to 20% on our roads. And again, it could only be used on 95. If we put a toll only on 95, because that was the talk at first, because it is our busiest, most trafficked road. And by the way, one of our country's most dangerous roads. a 111-mile stretch. We have more deaths on that road per mile. We're in the top 3 of the entire country. So when people think that our road's okay, that it's in good shape, that we've done a good enough job, or that there's no room for improvement, I would have to say we're wrong. How could you be the top 3? That's just not a number that none of us should be happy with that number.
And the other thing I'd like to add is the accounting. Remember this, while we are in Hartford a lot of the times, everything is available online. Every single department has public accounting and transparency. Our staff, you can look up their names and see how much they get paid. You know how much we get paid. We get paid $28,000 a year. But each state of Connecticut staff member, you can type their name in the website and see how much they got paid on their base salary. If they received state benefits, how much that was.
How many miles?
You
Everything.
can see, and every single department is mandated to do an audit every single year, every single fund we have in the state of Connecticut. So if folks feel leery about the government and spending, look at, it's all there. There's no surprises, there's nothing hidden. And then when you see something you like, please speak out and say that's a good thing. But if you see something you have concerns about, speak out. We had concerns, people had concerns about using Passport to the Parks money this year for signs in the parks. And people thought, I don't think that's a proper use for the Passport to the Parks money is signs in the parks. And we got to have that discussion. Now, I personally feel that you can use Passport to the Parks money for signs in the parks, but others felt no, it was only for park maintenance, not for park signage. And the citizens got to say that, and that money was actually not used for signs in the parks. It was the money for Passports to the Park was used for parks maintenance. So that's where, when people who have concerns, and there's nothing wrong with having concerns about making sure money is spent on what you wish it to be, to speak up, speak out, and your concerns are very much heard. I say if 50 people speak up about one thing, pro or con, it very much changes, make sure that people know what they're talking about.
That's a huge game changer.
Yeah.
On the tolls also, I understand what you're saying, but it's a federal law that those monies be used for the roads that toll is on. So we're told that if there was a toll between here and New London, well, the monies that were made for that toll have to be used on those roads before they can do anything or try to do anything with it. And that is another, it's a clause in the legislation that says you cannot use that money for anything but the road in which that toll fund was tallied in.
Right here.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. On another topic.
Okay.
I wonder if any of you are familiar with a program called 100% Connecticut, where different towns in Connecticut are looking at all of their energy use, electricity, heating oil, and blah, 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 and accounting for all of those needs, and then looking within their town to fulfill those energy needs by virtue of conservation, but also generation. 20 towns in Connecticut are doing that, but I don't see a lot going on in this corner of Connecticut. So I just wonder if you
As a
folks
town
even know
council,
about it.
even as a town council years ago, we were addressing that issue. And that was more the home run things, the things that were right in your face, like the lights. And we did that as a town council back in 2014. We're not part of that 100, I don't think we are, as far
It's
as
the first
towns
time
go.
I've heard about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, see, that's what I thought. Nobody even knows about it. And I can't run it, but you guys maybe know somebody who could run it and make it happen, so.
Absolutely, and even,
Tell me what
I
you
know we
think.
have a couple mayors in here. So even the municipality-wise, they could make a decision to do something like that. And certainly, I know at the state level, the state has been, we do brownfield grants, and we do a lot of energy grants. And that's what that
And I
energy
can
fund.
have Cody and Will raise their hands, so you get their contact information, those are folks who help us
Yeah.
out.
Okay.
And Will's back there
Will's back
also.
there too.
Right,
Yeah.
and I would add one thing to it. It's not generally, it's done in cooperation with local government, but it's not done by local government. It's done by citizens
Oh, okay,
who check in with the local government and make sure that everybody's on the same page.
that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
the best energy, they say, the best produced energy is the
Yeah.
energy you
Yeah,
save.
100.
That's right.
Connect-
Well, it's not just
100%
safety, it's also
Connecticut. That was
generation.
it.
Yeah.
100%.
Somebody had their hand up over there?
Over here, I think, yeah.
Gentleman in
Yeah.
front of
Gentleman.
you?
In front and then right and back, yeah.
Robert Applegate out of Gales Ferry. I want to clarify one thing. I thought you said we have no shovel-ready projects.
No, I didn't say that.
What did you say then?
I said shovel-ready projects as far as when that transportation money comes through, the federal dollars, it's not just shovel-ready, it's also money ready to be invested at the $2 to $8 level. We don't have piles of money in the waiting. There's a lot of states that are stockpiling money right now, anticipating this about to happen.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
You've got a bridge that we know for 5 years.
Oh, yeah, there's 365 known bridges, or 55 known bridges in our state that are deficient. And the state knows about them, they know we have to fix them, and that's only bridges. That doesn't include a lot of the other things that we have going
We
on.
have 2 bridges in this town, we have 1 bridge in Ledger that the cars cannot go over right now. I think people are aware of some of our problems, but we don't have billions of dollars in the bank right now to pay for these projects.
And that, I didn't mean not shovel ready,
So
so,
I'm glad you clarified that.
yeah, not,
Yeah,
The
the
other
money
quick
to
thing
invest in them.
related to article, I think today or yesterday, that there was within the current state budget, there was an adjustment to the assumed income tax receipt rate for the next 2 years. The last official publication was 4% growth, but the budget apparently includes 5.5% growth. It's sort of interpreted as a magic found money of $180 million to balance the budget. Presumably, you can't use information that's not formally written and agreed to. Do you have any comment?
Yeah,
on
Kate was prepared for that question, so we're glad you asked that.
So your question on the income tax growth,
Yeah.
was there growth in the income tax? Was that your
It was the
question?
extra
Budget
100.
the extra 180 million we budgeted.
Has stated that there was a assumed 4% increase in income tax receipts over the next 2 years, but the budget has passed, assumes 5.5% rate, which was not formally agreed to by any published.
It's different than what you prepared for.
I'm prepared for the actual numbers, not, yeah.
But the receipts are coming in higher than.
The receipts are coming in already higher than expected. So we're up in the revenue generation, in sales and use tax and withholding tax.
Yeah, but it was assumed to be 4% increase, but then it sort of
So how,
became 5.5, another $180 million to get the budget balanced.
yeah, so that's a lapse in the budget.
Yeah.
And
That
each of our
lapse, yeah.
budgets
Yeah.
have lapses in them.
Yep.
Our town budgets have lapses, a lot of our town budgets do have lapses in them. Last year, one of the big issues that Joe and I had when we voted on the last budget is we felt that lapse was far too high. One of the things that makes Connecticut unique is every quarter, we have to balance our budget. So if it turns out that right now the income is coming in above 4%, if it turns out that we have a dip, then at the end of the quarter, our next quarter ends October 1st, then there have to be cuts made. If it turns out, and that, like, there are sometimes, last year we didn't have any hurricanes in the fall. So there was extra money in some funds because we didn't have to pay for hurricane damage. Last winter was we didn't have a lot of snow and ice. There was a lot of extra money in the snow ice plowing fund that was taken out of that fund because it wasn't needed, put into funds that were low. Last year we had a huge increase because of the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico. We had a lot of residents from Puerto Rico come here, and we had a lot of municipalities that had an increase in their student population that was not expected. In New London, there was an increase in Hartford. In our cities, there were huge increases. So some of the money that wasn't used in things like snow plowing was transferred over to things that were over budgeted because what we thought was going to happen just didn't happen.